Good morning again. Let me reiterate that marriage workshop we're going to be doing, Love and Respect. It really isn't just for married couples. I know I went through it when I was married, and I may have shared that one of the techniques that they share is how to get out of the cycle of when spouses are just like toward each other. Not that you would ever do that, but we had this challenge in our marriage was that whenever I would pull into a parking spot, and a parking lot, my wife would have seemed to have had a direct revelation from God as to where I should park. And it never failed. Every time I'm just ready to pull in, some of you have been there, I'm just ready to pull in, and she's like, oh no, it's just like, then it starts. Perfectly great night, then it starts. And so I would say, I'm not feeling respected by the way you're telling me where to park. And she would say, and I'm not feeling loved by the way you're talking to me. And so that was code to both of us that, okay, we are in the cycle. Somebody needs to step out of it so that we don't continue to spiral down. But I've noticed with a 21-year-old daughter, some of those principles are the same. But I've learned not to say is, you're just like your mother. But really, so all I'm saying is that whether you're married and you're up there in your years together, or thinking about marriage, or even as some singleness, I have found there was just a lot of value in that workshop. So give that some thought as you're planning out your month of June. Let me pray again for us. Again, God, for this place and for your people here, I give you thanks. And I just pray that as we enter this worship center, that we don't leave the burdens of life at the door, but that we bring them in so that the filter of your word, of worshiping you, of being with your people, can penetrate whatever is on our hearts and minds. And I pray that the words of my mouth will be acceptable in your sight, because you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, we continue, and we're going to continue for a few more weeks into our series on a new way to be human. Again, somebody asked me the other day, how do you come up with the topics? Does the Reformed Church of America give you an outline on what to teach and when to teach it? And no, they don't. And it's just the team got together and thought way back in the fall, what are we going to do in the beginning of the year? And so we said, let's tackle the Sermon on the Mount. And no doubt there's just a lot of stuff there. A lot of, as we've discovered together, not some easy things, not some easy subjects that Jesus mentioned years ago, yet it's interesting how they're timeless and they still impact our lives today. And so we are in chapter 6 of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus has brought up two major temptations in chapter 6. Now, Mark talked about one of them a couple weeks ago when he talked about our rewards and how people were doing things just to win the approval, to be rewarded by people here on earth. They would give or they would pray just to be seen, just to be noticed, to be looked at. Hey, I'm somebody significant. And the point was then your rewards here on earth for that versus heaven. And then we'll be talking about today the idea of where we focus things in life, and what are we serving, and who are we serving, and how that at times can get switched up real easy without us even knowing it. Today, there are some questions really about our treasures here on earth. And that's what Jesus is asking us. Where are our treasures? In other words, what are we living our lives for? Now, some would say you can tell what you're living your life for is by looking at your checkbook, for those of you who still use a checkbook, or you can go online and track where you've been spending money. And wherever you're giving, if you look in your checkbook register or going online and check, where the money flows is where your heart is. And so that's one way to look at that. I think for many of us, again, in our culture, where our treasure is often just gets jaded. Not because we want it to, but because we just live in a world where it's easy to look at the external things. But, as we looked at looking at this passage and other passages, it's interesting that, Jesus picked, where is your treasure? His followers back then were having the same issue that we are now. Loving your enemy. Yeah, same issue back then as it is now. Going the extra mile, going above and beyond the call of duty. Issue back then, issue now. And so I've just found it very interesting as I've worked through this over the past few months that, again, those issues and those subjects on the Sermon on the Mount really apply to us today. And maybe that's why when we kicked it off, we had shared it's probably one of the most famous sermons of Jesus, because those issues touch the hearts and lives of the people he talked to, and today they impact our lives as well. So look at in the Bibles and in the chairs in front of you, page 679, and we're going to be looking at Matthew 6, and to begin with verses 19, 20, and 21. Let me begin with verse 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, when I first learned this verse a long time ago, the word vermin wasn't in there. I think most of us probably know it as I wrote it down from, I think, again, it's the King James Version, is where moth and rust destroy. And so then I had to, vermin and rust. I mean, those are like two different words here. It's like, what in the world? What was somebody thinking? Or did somebody really mess it up bad? But as I researched it and read into it, the concept's the same. And so there's where some of the people who translated it, you could have said this or you could have said that. The idea of rust is that, it just destroys whatever it touches. And, sooner or later there's an issue there with the outdoor item. If it's most of the time it's outdoors. Coming from Detroit in the 60s and 70s, most of the time it was the vehicles that just were pieces of junk after the snow just destroyed them and the salt. But vermin is this, I didn't use that word much, but living in Arizona before I came here, we had roof rats. Do you have roof rats here? Oh, okay. Right? Did I say that right? Roof? Not woof woof as in a dog, but roof as in your house structure. Okay, roof. Is that better? Anyway, roof rats. And what we didn't have them, thank the Lord for that. But you could have a very high-end home, and usually it's those who had the orange trees or the lemon trees that the rats were attracted to that, and as the tree grew and hung over your house, the rats would sort of climb up and get the fruit, and then they would hop from the tree branch onto your roof, and somehow they'd make it into your house and just start to destroy everything in your attic. Electrical wiring, gnawing at stuff, and sort of like with rust destroying it from the inside out or outside in, these vermins were just like nibbling at everything and then destroying it. And so that's the concept here in this passage. And again, I think as we read through this, it's where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. And so I really think it's not too difficult for us to think of the rust example. Well, let me just go back to the moth. Let's take moths, very innocent-looking creature, little bug. We all know what a moth is. But if a moth gets into your closet and into your clothing, it will just eat away at it. And even the best material will soon be riddled with holes because of a moth. And you're thinking, it's just a little thing. How can it do that much damage? But they do. In fact, and you don't even know what's happening until you go to wear the garment. It's just like, what in the world? Look at this. And so as we look at this verse about do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin or rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. And again, I think for many of us, even the whole where thieves break in and steal. You've heard the more you have, the more it has you. And so we lock our doors, we install locks, we put the bar in the sliding windows to protect yourself, or the sliding doors. You put in some cameras probably. Some places where you live have a security guard or a security gate. In fact, you can even monitor who comes into if you have the high-end system, you can monitor who's coming in. If we had a system here at the church, we could say, whoever swiped that key, we could see who came in when and where. My sister in Michigan came out, and she was looking at her phone all the time. I was like, what are you doing? And I go, who are you texting? You keep looking at the phone. She goes, oh, I'm looking at my living room. I'm making sure my alarm's on and that nobody's in there. And so, again, the more you have, the more it has you. And maybe I was a boring brother and she had nothing else to do but check out her living room to make sure it was as immaculate as it was when she left. But again, nothing wrong with having things. And I'm going to say that a couple times here. It's nothing wrong with having possessions or being wealthy. The question is, where is your heart? And I think we've been around enough that, Jacob, let's take a look at a couple of those slides, the one with the bumper. He who dies with the most toys wins. If you drive a BMW, I'm not pointing fingers at you. Some would say that's too bad, you should have bought a Mercedes instead. But anyway, the idea is that's what some people think. Those who die with the most toys wins. And let me then go to the slide with a cup. She who dies with the most fabric wins. For those of you who quilt. And I know there's a lot of you in this audience that quilts. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there to be equally, to pick on both sides, And if there are any men here who quilt, then this applies to you too. But again, we have, and I'm moving again, as many of you know, and I'm still going through stuff, and it's just like, how much stuff do you really need? How much stuff, it could be an age thing that I'm at, and I know the older we get, the more you realize you don't need some things. And the older we get, the more you realize I'm in a different stage of life. I really, this stuff isn't all that important as it was when I was 30 to have 17 different cartoon characters in cereal bowls. That made a difference to Mackenzie. Now, I don't really care what happens to those cereal bowls. And when I have a grandchild one day, maybe 10 or 20 years, there'll be new characters out there to look at. So all that to say, folks, is it is just easy to start to collect and start to have these treasures that we, at times, maybe, just maybe, they take over a little bit too much of our heart. As we are thinking through this, I have, again, with going back to the rust, I had a Chevy Nova, a 4-door, but it was really a 2-door because the two back doors were completely rusted. And when I would drive, I'd be hearing this banging, and it's the door flaps flapping in the wind because the rust has taken over. Even with the moths, as I'm looking at moving again, it's just like, how many blue shirts do I really need? How the clothing we have, how much of it is really used. And you've heard the little things on TV that'll say, if you haven't worn it in a year, then you just don't need it. If you haven't used it in a year, you just don't need it. And we all know that in our minds, but still somehow it just accumulates. And now it's like, now I got to move it. Do I really use it enough to move it? And so for me, the blessing in moving a couple times in the past 2 years is it really has helped me to think through what's really important and how much do I really need. And if the Lord ever brings into my path the opportunity to remarry, let me just address that. Some of you are pretty funny because you'll say, Juno, I have a personal question. Yeah, and I don't know where they're going with this. And they'll say, hey, can I set you up with somebody? Or are you ready to date? And you know what? When it's the right, just like when I met my wife the first time, whatever. On our first date, 6 months later, we were married. So I'm not planning anything out, and we'll just see what the Lord, that's just a whole side thing there, just in case wondering minds want to know, and you get in your life groups and you're wondering, is he ever going to get remarried? We'll see what happens with that. And so, no, I'm not dating anybody. So, okay, let's get back to the passage here. Not that you really care about all those things. But what I have learned, and I have shared it before, is in light of eternity, what difference does it make? What difference does some of the things we are focusing on make? And we know there's the story in Matthew a little bit later about the rich young ruler who says to Jesus, what must I do to have eternal life? And I'm doing all these things, and I'm not murdering anybody. I'm not committing adultery. I'm not stealing. I'm not bearing false witness. And I'm honoring my father and my mother. And then Jesus lowers the hammer and says, go sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And the guy had a little problem with that. Now, Jesus didn't say owning things is wrong. He didn't say you were a hard worker. You obviously didn't love me because you have accumulated some things. No, he didn't say that. And so I want to be clear to again say that material things aren't evil in and of themselves. It's the position we allow them to play in our lives. And so again, whatever you're looking at something, you want it so bad. From my grad school days at Wheaton, I would say, in light of eternity, what difference does it make? Am I so hung up on something that if it was gone, would my life be a wreck? Now, we talked about this in the staff as we were preparing for today, and so I grabbed Tina's phone. I said, okay, then let me take your phone. No, don't take my phone. Because we probably are addicted to our phones. and our life would be a wreck without the ability to communicate. But that's taken it to an extreme. But again, folks, it's like, what is in your life? What is in your home that is just so absorbing you that if it was gone, you would be a wreck? And I think as we look at this passage, it is easy to focus on just the material things, because that's the illustration. Where is your treasure? But I think it goes well beyond that. So let's focus in then on the next verse there, Jason. The eye is the lamp of your body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Again, for those of us who wear glasses, or even who are in denial that we need glasses, when they're all messed up, it's difficult to see clearly. Even on our iPhones, if the screen is messed up, you can't see what's beyond that. I thought about having mud thrown all over these windows and then saying, we really can't see, and then having somebody spray it off and have it all clear out, and we can see, to make the point. But it's a pretty easy passage to get the point, that everything comes from our vision into our body. And we've heard, garbage in, garbage out. And so again, the question is, what are we allowing into our life? Or what are we allowing to filter our heart? Do we at times need to clean off not just our eyeglasses, but the lenses to our heart? And that's what I found again as I've been reading and wrestling and trying to teach this Sermon on the Mount, is God is doing a number even on my heart to be seeing people more clearly. It doesn't mean I'm perfect, but it does challenge me as I'm interacting with others. And so again, what are we doing? What are we allowing into our heart? And again, visually. And maybe this is where from the treasure, the idea of things, to maybe it's more of an inward journey as well. How is our heart doing? And again, I'm not saying, I guess you could say, are you just watching a bunch of filth on TV or pornography? Yes, that's the obvious connection, folks. But I wonder what's deeper. What are we allowing into our heart through our eyes? And are we at times being as careful as we need to be with filtering? God, this isn't healthy. This discussion right now isn't healthy. This discussion is bordering on some gossip. This isn't healthy. Because as we know, things can surely turn up pretty quick in our own hearts when it comes to not knowing all the facts on some things. So what am I doing to make sure my heart stays as pure as I humanly can make it, so it doesn't become dark? And again, that's why we have night lights, because we don't want to live in the dark. So when you wake up in the middle of the night, you have night lights, because otherwise you're walking around in the dark and going by braille, and then stubbing your toe on something, and then needing to confess what you just said, even though nobody there could hear you. But we really need to ask God to open up our eyes. What I found, again, is so much of this isn't just what I'm doing. The rich young ruler was like, what do I need to do? I'm doing all these things. And yet God said, give it all away. But so much of a new way to be human is making sure we're connecting with God so that he can change our heart to allow us to live out our lives. And then the very end of that passage we're looking at, can we take a look at that, Jacob? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And let me say here, folks, on this is that some would say this is the pinnacle verse in the whole Sermon on the Mount. Who you're serving. You really can't serve both. You can't have everything in the world. You know we can't take it with us, right? You've heard the saying, you can't take it with us. None of us have seen this image of a hearse. If you were at that graveside service, you'd be going, somebody didn't quite get the memo. Unless it's a huge grave and that whole U-Haul is going into it. But it's still not going anywhere. But again, who are you serving? And, let me say, my daughter graduated from Santa Barbara City College with her associates. And so her mentor friend came up from Arizona, and her husband took us out to eat to celebrate. They have more disposable income than I do. And so they picked up the tab for dinner. And so my daughter says, hey, what does market price mean? Next to the menu, next to the thing. And the guy says, well, that just means whatever the price is that day for that particular food item. She says, okay. She was like, is it appropriate for me to ask what the market price is? He goes, well, you can, but you just don't need to worry about it tonight because it's my treat. Mackenzie goes, well, I think I'm going to get surf and turf. And then she goes, what are you going to get, Dad? And I says, oh, I know you said don't worry about the market price, but I just don't want to take advantage, and I really want to know what this market price is before I order the surf and turf. And he's like, you are not going to know what it is. And Mackenzie says, Dad, you never order this, so order it. So I also had surf and turf. All that to say, folks, is that his wealth isn't evil. He blessed us tremendously, and we all even order dessert. And usually when you're at those kind of restaurants, everybody splits a dessert, at least if I'm picking up the tab. Even at Cheesecake Factory, everybody splits. If there's 6 people, we all split that one $10 piece of cheesecake. But anyway, all that to say, folks, is I know people who God has given them resources well beyond that of what I can ever dream of. And they are constantly giving, blessing, funding outreach initiatives, helping ministries beyond what I even make in a year. And they don't do it they're not, putting up the scorecard as to, here's what I'm doing. They just do it from their heart because they know to whom much is given, much is required, and they just bless people. And so again, I want to say that please don't be on a guilt trip if God has blessed you with more resources than other people. But if you think you're going to take him to the grave with you, we all know that is just not what God has intended. But again, it's just a slippery road because we all want to save for our retirement. And so how much do you spend and how much do you save? And sure, you like nice things, but do they consume you so much that is what it's about, that particular item? And that item can be a lot of different things. So the idea of what are you seeing? Where is it dark in your soul because the eyes to your heart are fuzzy? What haven't you given up to God? Maybe it's an experience in the past that you're still angry about, that you're bitter about. Maybe that's what's clouding your heart. Maybe it is a material thing. Maybe it is your home or the vehicle you drive that you almost worship it because you have worked your whole life for this particular item. Maybe it's a collection of some items in your home that, again, it's hijacked you. You didn't plan it, but all of a sudden, it's like, this is interesting. And if you were to talk with somebody, and maybe they would say, yeah. And what's interesting is that when you teach on these things, it's easy to jump to, again, just the issue of your treasures. And I think in our environment, that's probably true. So we need to be very careful of that our treasures don't become our God. And again, that treasure could vary depending on who you are, your life experiences. One thing is, I do a lot of funerals. I did a whole bunch of them in Arizona. So let me be sensitive with this. But when I'm talking to the family and they're saying, he was my everything. She was my everything. I don't know what I am going to do. My whole life revolved around him or her. No doubt they're experiencing a loss, and they may not mean that deceased person was their everything, but I think at times we may focus on our family a little bit too much. Because our spouses aren't our everything. Now maybe, because I was 32 when I got married, and the Lord used me in a lot of different ways, and I had an absolutely wonderful life when I was 32, I had beyond 32, but I considered my life of value when I was single. That I'm now single, I still consider my life of value and of worth. That my whole life cannot and should not revolve around my deceased wife. Now, I love my daughter deeply, and at times, my mind can go to, well, what happens if she passes away? And I can tear up just thinking that. But again, she can't be my everything. I can't live my whole life for my absolutely wonderful daughter. God is my everything. My relationship with Jesus, and going back to the ending of this passage, who am I serving is everything. Now, the confessions of a pastor would be, my church cannot become my God. And I've talked to way too many pastors where it does. It becomes our mistress in our relationship with our family. And trust me, even as a single dad with a daughter, she reminds me of that. So when I'm visiting with her and I don't have my phone, she is thrilled that she gets my attention and that I'm not checking emails and sending texts about, oh, that's right, are they going to do this for Sunday? But again, folks, I just think it's key for us in our humanity to remember our treasures aren't here. To keep thinking through, okay, Lord, what am I letting into my heart? What needs to be detoxed? Needs to be flushed out of my system. What stuff that's just floating around there that is inhibiting me from loving you with my whole heart? And then, how can I serve you better? Now, I'm not against retirement. I'm not sure I'll ever retire. Some of you are going rats. But I'm not even sure it's quite biblical, but I haven't studied it all yet because I'm so far away from that. So for those of you who are retired, this is not, again, a slam against retirement. But retirement just means you have an extra 40 hours a week or 50 to do something else with your life. It's not that you're just doing nothing. And I know many of you who are retired that put in a boatload of hours serving the Lord in some incredible ways. And so let me just honor you with that in the sense of, again, who are we serving? It's just not us. None of us have the script of our life as to retire big with a huge amount of money and sit out in the ocean and do nothing. God's called us all to serve him in one way or another, whether it's at home in prayer, if you're unable to get around, maybe it's volunteering in the many ways that you do, maybe it's in your daily job. There's all kinds of ways to serve God. And so, again, backing everything up that we have talked about is who are we serving? Some would say this is the pivotal point of the whole Sermon on the Mount, is who are you serving? And again, going back to just trying to do things to make a good impression, keep the lens of your eyes clean for your heart. Allow God to change you from the inside out. So whether you're serving while you're employed, serving while you're retired, volunteering someplace, we do it because God has changed us, and we feel that God is going to use us and continue to use us to make a difference in his kingdom. And all God's people said, Amen. Again, folks, I don't share these as if I am the expert on all of it, but as I'm in this with you together. And how is God going to allow us to journey through this as a corporate body, just to make sure we're just not stuck on things. And none of us really want to do that. So we're going to continue to worship. We're going to continue to worship by allowing you opportunities to give back to God through your offering. And so the ushers will be coming forward to receive your offering. And then after the offering is received, you're able to respond by coming forward at a response station. You can take communion as a way of remembering the death, the resurrection, and the sacrifice that Jesus has done for you. And so if God is leading you to that, you are welcome to take it up front and in the back. We'll have some rovers around if you can't get out of your seat. Maybe you want to light a candle and say, Lord, help me to clean up my sight so that I can see you and serve you more clearly. Maybe you need to hammer something to the cross and say, this is what my treasure is, Lord. Take this away. And that could be a daily journey for many of us. You can say, Lord, I don't want this. I don't want to be stuck on this. And you're okay today, but you know what? Next week, next month, you have to recommit that. It is a process. Maybe you want to come over here to the side and actually have a conversation with somebody who would be honored to actually pray with you about what's on your heart. And so as we give back our offering back to God and have opportunities to respond, may God be blessed by everything we do. Ushers,